In a moment, our leading guest contributors will share their analysis of the biggest stories and issues of the week. Everything from their reactions to my previous guest, Dr. Umar Ado, and the new National Opposition Coalition, to this week's APC conference and the rousing endorsement of President Tinubu, from Nigeria topping the Africa chart for the most road accidents so far in 2025, to the Nigerian government suing Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan over claims that the Senate President, Godswill Akpabio, and the former governor of Kogi State, Yahaya Bello, both tried to assassinate her. And also Governor Umo Eno of Akwa Ibom State announcing today that he's almost certainly leaving the PDP. I hope we'll have time to get to all these topics. For their considered assessments, I'm joined now in the studio by the legislative consultant and public policy analyst, Chibuzo Kereke, and by the policy strategist and group CEO of the Global Investment and Trade Company, Baba Yusuf. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Good to see you again.
Good evening.
And since I mentioned your name first, I shall come to you first. What is your reaction? I'm sure you heard Dr. Umar Ado earlier, very passionately speaking about a lot of things, including the National Opposition Coalition, which seems now to have got off the ground. I mean, what's your assessment of all that?
Well, thank you very much. He said a lot of things from the National Coalition movement to the issue of defection, and generally about our democracy and how it's working. The fact is, major democracies of the world, multi-party system, is what obtains. And then political opposition coalition is also a fundamental factor in most democracies. We have seen it in Nigeria the first time in 2014 when they even upstaged a sitting government. But the situation now is completely different. Also, on the other hand, Section 40 of our Constitution allows people to coalesce, assemble on their own aspirations to pursue maybe political objective or what have you. But the question has always remained, some of these efforts are elitist in nature, without grassroots legitimacy, being able to carry the people, along. So it ends up becoming, just a political calculus. People are coming together to be able to upstage a sitting government. And that is even the issue the current coalition that is in power is having, where you have some CPC members, ABGA or other AMPP and co singing different tunes, because the coalition may not have been grounded in ideology or transitional ideology. And what is critical in coalition is that it's grounded in political ideology that can unify and pursue a greater cause that Nigerians can rally around. This idea of when election is coming up, people come together, let us make sure that we overthrow the government in power. And then when we get another one, we go back to that cycle of looking for how to remove them. Shouldn't be the case. And then he mentioned the issue of defection and people, legislators leaving their seats in line with Section 68(1)(g) of the Constitution. And you see, the process is complex. It's even beyond gathering at the National Assembly, hoping that at the 5th day, a miracle will happen. Now, if people defect, there are 3 conditions as a provisor mentioned in that section. That 1, there is a division, 2, there is a merger, and 3, there is a faction. That on these conditions, if you defect, you are not going to vacate your seat. Let's even assume, without considering that they didn't meet those conditions. When you defect, in terms of legislative design, practice, and process, you will need a motion. The Senate President or Speaker is not holding executive power. It's a college. There has to be a resolution. Motion will come. You need evidence to present before the floor. Remember, the defectors you want to declare their seat vacant are going to be present and voting on that motion. So when you put the motion to vote, you may not likely get it. And you have heard some of them say, oh, we even need court order to perform this particular function. So I think we need to clarify that section. It's important that to hold our politics together, ensure that people stay true to the cause and the vehicle, and even need to open the space to have independent candidates, that we expand, or rather clarify that provision, make it very simplistic to ensure that if you what we want is what is prescribed. There are no intrinsic complexities in implementing it, which is the challenges they face.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that opening salvo. Baba Yusuf, good to see you again.
Likewise, Charles.
I wonder what your thoughts are on this national opposition coalition, coming off the back of what Chibuzo Okereke was saying there. I mean, we heard Dr. Umar Ado taking a position of, well, they'd rather form a new party, but already some other people want to be in the APC, or the ADC or the SDP and so on. I mean, do you see them fracturing over that issue, potentially?
Charles, that is the tragedy of the opposition party, moving into 2027. They are just bumping into each other. There is no strategy. There is no forward thought, with all profound respect to all of them.
And that's partly what he was talking about ideology,
Absolutely.
or at least a philosophy.
And even if there is none, let's even consider there's not, because some other time we can talk about the conspiracy of the elites, which is part of what Chibuzo is saying.
Yes.
The point here is, whatever you want to do and you don't have a clear-cut strategy to go about it, you're not going to win. Now, you have a political juggernaut in the person of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who was in the trenches of opposition for God knows how long, who understands the mechanics and dynamics of opposition, who has stayed thirsty with all the opposition figures for a very long time, having that stay power in opposition for a long time. And you have majority now, people that are in opposition, that I call the buttered, quote-unquote, politicians over time in the PDP and other parties, that are not used to stay in the sun and be thirsty and weather the storm and pay your dues in the trenches as opposition, are coming to think that it is going to be a transactional conversation, transactional or operational. Let me use operational, that you can just come, get together and do this. I have a bit of a worry. I align with the question you asked about how sure are they that forming a new political party will win the game for them. And I will say, with all sense of responsibility and experience, I've been part of formation of political party build-up to return to Fourth Republic 1998. I've been part of alliances. I've been part of the ruling party in PDP before I left politics in 2005. And I can say this for free. There is no time for them to form a political party. And even if they do, let's eyeball the situation. Politics is about numbers, simplicity. The former Vice President Atiku Abubakar got about 7 million votes, 6.9. Senator Rabi Musa Konkoso got about 1.4 million. And we have Mr. Peter Obi of the Obedient Movements and Labour Party coming to almost change the game with 6.1 million. Over time, what happens is they are not even thinking what has happened to those people that voted for them in 2023, that have become disillusioned, frustrated and disgruntled, and that have gotten tired and have frittered away to other political parties. And the assumption is these people are going to come and just those numbers will be transmuted into an opposition party. That's not how it plays. The people need to demonstrate they have the political sagacity. The new political party will not even have time to play the structure game across Nigeria, which was a down point for Mr. Peter Obi, his inability to form those structures across that was the argument people were making. And it is going to be worse now, because the momentum and the phenomenon that Peter Obi brought is what you call a lightning hardly strikes in the same place again. And then there's an issue of vested interest. These people are coming with what I call conflicting interests. How are they able to come within this time, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, form a new political party, step down for this man, step down for that man, beyond your interest, to say you have, just like Tinubu and Muhammad Buhari did, in 2014. So the conflict of interest, the lack of strategy, and the assumption that the votes that were there in 2023 for all the political, for the leaders, including the president himself, they think that it's going to be automatically translated. That's not going to happen. But the tragedy of Nigeria is the elites will continue to play this yo-yo because the citizens allow it.
Good points there. And Chibuzo Kereke, I think the issue of whether or not those votes are still going to be there is a very valid one. But also the fact that, I mean, you've got, they argue that they have something of a philosophy, that we should give them the space to come up with their own, you know, the version of an ideology. That if you've got people like Peter Obi in there, who had his very clear, you know, things that he wanted to do, and you have people like Atiku Abubakar, who actually wrote a small book about restructuring, that these are fundamental things that they're going to be able to crystallize into some kind of a document that sheds light on what their philosophy is going to be, so that we should give them time to do that. But just moving on from that, because time is galloping ahead, it's astonishing how quickly time moves, isn't it? They argue that seeing the APC going into conference and all the rest of them is a mark of nervousness on the part of the APC, and that it is too early for them to be, that's the APC, to be talking about 2027 rather than focusing on development. That is a mark of the fear that they have, that's why they're doing all these endorsements and things. Well, what do you reckon?
Well, I don't think so. Actually, in political party administration and strategy, such conferences are what we refer as political posturing, to show kind of confidence, internal cohesion, douse tension, and internal dissent, and what have you. And you could see that almost all the major pressure groups and organs of the party came with their own motion, which was consolidated thereafter by the party national chairman, and they all ruled that this president is our only candidate.
He's the Messiah.
He's the Messiah. So, you see, they have, for me, they have scored 1-0 against the opposition parties.
Absolutely.
Most of them have not been able to hold NEC meetings. They are not even able to organize. And Baba, Yusuf mentioned something critical: convergence of vested conflict of interest.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a very big, you know, challenge. So they are having critical issue of vehicle. We have not gotten to the fundamental issue
of who's going to drive the vehicle.
And Section 75 of the Electoral Act 2022 gives 1 year for you to register political association. So they got a very big problem. So I think that the APC conference, maybe they stimulated it by the way they have started the issue of 2027 since almost January this year. So I think the APC, maybe as part of their the second midterm celebration, decided to have that convergence to also show. And the president, I think, understanding, and Baba Yusuf captured this, where this man has been in the trenches. And he said, this is the game, right, that is willing to
those were the words he used, actually. He called it a game.
More people. And when you go back to 2014, when the G7 governor stormed out of Ego Square, you know, on the basis that power is supposed to go back to the north. And they made sure, with having Governor Amechi from Rivers, who is from the zone of the sitting president at the time, they upstaged him. Today you're having governors and political leaders in the south saying, you taught us this. We've got to stay with a southern, you know, president. So what I think is that the conference has, you know, projected a posturing that this party is cohesive, they are together, and they are standing with this man. And the opposition, if they are really going to put up a challenge, need to get their ass together.
Okay. Well, let's try and keep the answers a bit shorter, because so we can get to everything. But just in that same vein of what is happening within the opposition, and the fact that the APC seems to be consolidating. I mean, I don't know if you heard, but Governor Umo Eno of Akwa Ibom State saying earlier that he's going to be moving away from the PDP. I mean, he said that just a few hours ago, and that the party is basically a mess at the national level. He hasn't made it official, but it is now almost an absolute certainty. Your reaction to that? Because he seems to think that he could lose his ticket if he doesn't, pack his bags and leave the PDP fairly soon.
Oh, I totally agree. First of all, the vehicle is very rickety, so he has to find another vehicle that will take him to the destination. Secondly, is a game of strategy. What is the way for him to win the next election? And that is what played out with even the Delta State governor and all that. And that is why the oppositions are continuing shooting themselves in the foot. We had opposition parties, Charles, from 1999 to 2023 that had governors that have stayed in opposition, the ACs and all that. Now what is happening is, newsflash, more governors in PDP are moving, including the most controversial ones. The ones that are more vocal against this government will be the last ones to ditch the PDP. And that's the fact. But going on from there, I think the opposition are getting it wrong. If you are running a race, the coach for a 4x4 relay or for a 100 meters relay will tell you, you focus on your race. If you are busy looking at the next guy running with you, you've lost the race. They are busy fixated on APC and their political dynamism and whatever they are doing, rather than looking at their internal problems.
Yeah, but they are doing that, to be fair. I mean, they set up a committee which is supposed to report at the end of this month.
Very well, Charles. You're a brilliant journalist, but you know they've been doing this meeting for God knows how long. We are counting down to midterm. You have to balance the conversation. Right. But the reality is they are out of time until and unless they are actually able to move the needle from where they are now, whether it is PDP or the other opposition parties. It is highly likely that the remnants of the other people in other parties will move. And the argument about people should should vacate their seat. You see, the issue of this with the conspiracy of elites is that when it was PDP's turn, they did the same thing. And if an APC person now decounts to PDP, it is the same thing. They will say, carry go. So as far as I'm concerned, Nigerians generally should be more fixated on the issues that touches Nigeria, and not be fixated on the drama that the politicians are playing, because like I always say, Nigerian politicians are the same actors in different costumes.
Yeah, very interesting. And let's move on from that, because we've talked a little bit about politics now. But let's turn to Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan. The federal government has pressed charges against her for accusing Godswill Akpabio, the Senate president, and former governor of Kogi State, Yahaya Bello, of plotting to kill her, basically. Allegations they've both denied. The government is alleging that she's defamed Akpabio and Bello and said it could harm their reputations. Your reaction to that?
Well, I think this is a very complex issue, and I draw example from United States when Congresswoman Alexandra Cortez had told during the crackdown of illegal immigrants, he had told them on how to be able to dodge the officers, when not to open your door, how not to answer questions. And actually the head of that operation wrote to the Attorney General to say, this congresswoman may have overstepped her, and that it should be reviewed. So in this, I watched how she graphically, stated what happened, including the time, the vehicle, who drove it, and how the assassination was supposed to happen, not in Abuja, so there won't be a suspect, but somewhere, so that, so it was a graphic description that portend maybe a kind of intelligence.
Right.
So, and
as briefly as you can.
yeah.
Sorry.
So I think that number one, the state has the power to review such issues, but it should be transparently done, because we're also dealing with a woman, and the women are in the marginal zone, and where we are saying they should be given opportunity to represent. So I think it should be done
delicately handled.
Yeah, delicately handled.
Let me get your point on that issue, because this case, of course, the latest twist in a row that's engrossed everybody in Nigeria. Just a few weeks ago, Senator Uduaghan accused Senator Akpabio of sexually harassing her. He also denied that allegation. She's currently suspended from the Senate for 6 months without pay for allegedly unruly and disruptive behavior. Where do you reckon all this is going to end? I mean, it just seems to grow longer legs.
And that's the issue I have. I've said it in another forum that my concern with this issue, I was a bit restrained about talking about Senator Natasha versus Senator Akpabio, because these people are not talking about, how the multidimensionally poor in their constituencies are suffering. They are doing true fighting in the hallowed chamber of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as far as I'm concerned. And it has become expectable, it has become a subject matter over and beyond the people that are being maimed and killed and kidnapped all over Nigeria and the multidimensional social economy.
Well, she would argue that an issue of justice.
Now, I will land on that.
And
I will land on that. My concern is people. Women. Yes, and I totally agree. But at that level, for crying out loud, we should be able to come with a position that will show clarity in what we are doing.
Right.
Senator Natasha, if she has issues and she has evidences, she should bring them forward. That would have even made it a bit more difficult for this matter to come up. It appears they are turning the table against her. Personally, I'm a bit constrained now to speak, because for months everybody now is saying, Senator, where are the evidences?
Yeah, well,
so that we can be defended.
They've gone to court, so
now, since it is, so we'll look forward to that. But you see, to land on this, that is why we should be circumspect also.
Right.
I think it is Suzu, the great military strategist, that say when you want to go to war, you should be ready for it.
Right.
And you should guard your tongue and know how to speak.
Absolutely.
So that you don't commit, a political suicide at the end of the day.
Good point.
Now it appears she has become on the low ground rather than on the high ground with the sentiments and the sympathy she has gathered. I hope and pray that at the end of the day, the focus should be reverted back to what it should be. The people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria,
Okay.
Senator Natasha and Akpabio, we are friends. They will always sort themselves out.
Literally 1 minute for this. Let's turn to the news that Nigeria tops the Africa chart for road accidents in 2025 so far. What is your reaction to that?
Well, Charles, is expected. 230 million people, 13 million vehicles, 300,000 kilometers of road with only 31% paved, the other 69% completely undone. So, and weak institutional operations in terms of licensing. How do people get licensed to drive? You can just do it in your house and find a way to, get the license, and you're already there. But also in terms of methodology, we have to look at it, critically, because Nigeria already with the highest population, almost at par with South Africa in terms of vehicle population. So definitely, if you plot this kind of research, they are going to be at the top. But it speaks to the need for us to reform our road safety, policies,
right.
And the way we do that.
Okay.
I think that is very important.
Unfortunately, you got 30 seconds.
3 things. Reflection of infrastructural deficit, weak enforcement of rules and regulations, and a very, very negative corporate culture as a people, erosion of our value systems.
On that note, I want to thank you very much indeed. Baba Yusuf is the policy strategist and group CEO of the global investment and trade company. Chibuzo Kereke is a legislative consultant and public policy analyst. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And do have a jolly good weekend.
Likewise, Charles.
That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again next week. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.